So hi everyone and welcome to our webinar. What we're talking about today is compassionate leadership. So leadership which, maybe because of the crisis is a bit more compassionate than normal, and we're talking about how we might be able to continue this new style of leadership after the crisis. So I'm really excited to be co-hosting with a long-term friend and an internationally recognized HR director, Tali Shlomo, who's worked and set up global operations all over the world with a really interesting set of skills and qualifications. So CIPD, action learning, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I love because I did psychology, coaching, all of these really interesting different angles on really how to create environments and strategies and cultures that are progressive and agile and really inclusive. So I'm really excited that you can join us. Hi, Tali.
Thank you. Wow, what a lovely introduction. Thank you for inviting me to this, I think, what is a really important topic, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us on this Monday afternoon. So thank you. I'm looking forward to what is going to be an interesting conversation.
Good. So before we jump in, for anyone that doesn't know Varan Performance and myHRcareers, I'll just do a quick intro. So I'm Becky Statham, and I'm one of the consultants at Varan Performance. Varan is a boutique consultancy, and what we specialize in is really helping businesses to improve and to transform their HR function or service. So what this means in reality is HR teams come to us, HR leaders, and they need to improve their processes, their data, their insights. It might be their org design, it might be their technology. And what we do is we support those businesses from an independent and software agnostic point of view. But really what we help companies to do as well is to connect with each other, because the best way of transforming HR is really to connect you to other businesses and other HR leaders. And myHRcareers, which most of you know about, is our biggest network for doing that. So myHRcareers connects now over 17,000 aspiring and inspiring HR professionals, many of whom we really believe will be future leaders like Tali. So it's really important that we get inspirational leaders, thought-provoking conversations, and bring everyone together. So we do want this to be a discussion if possible. So Tali and I will be kind of throwing questions and thoughts back to each other, but you've got a Q&A button, and you've also got the chat. So please do, converse with us, ask your questions, send us your comments, and we're also going to do a poll as well. So we'll see how that goes. So we're going to have a few questions. I'm going to ask Tali a few questions around compassionate leadership, and we're also going to start with a poll as well. So Tali, over to you to talk about what we mean by leading with compassion and where you've seen this style of leadership over the last few weeks.
Great, thank you. So, maybe let's start off with kind of taking a moment to reflect on how some leaders have shown up since, the beginning of lockdown. I've seen acts of kindness. I've seen our leaders and our team colleagues concerned for well-being. I've seen concern for family members. And I've seen how we've absolutely making an effort to ensure that colleagues can fulfill the work from home effectively, and where we have furloughed colleagues, that's taken place with care and compassion. And I've kind of spent a bit of time thinking, what is compassion and why is it so important? So for me, it's showing up with kindness and empathy to other people. And it is the act it's how we behave and how we show up. And before I kind of take it further and kind of delve in, this is, I think, a really nice opportunity to run a poll and just to kind of open up to all of yourselves today to really capture your thinking around this. So if we can maybe just fire up the poll, and we'll keep it open for a few seconds. And this is not an exhaustive list. We'll keep it relatively simple, and just to start capturing what we've seen. We'll just keep it open for a few more.
It's interesting, the kindness word that you said, actually, because that's being used a lot, not around leadership, but there's lots of mental health issues, lots of things in the press at the moment, and so being kind has kind of leaked from non-business into business, I think, recently.
It's been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I think we've all seen it in so many different aspects of what we're doing currently. So if we maybe close our poll and have a look at what you've all expressed. Wow, 71% flexible hours, you know, asking after family and friends, 67%. Isn't that awesome, right? How often did we ever ask, how is your family, how's your friends, how are your loved ones? More understanding of change and compromise. Wonderful. Asking about well-being, 75%. You know, I think that speaks volume. So thank you for participating. And the reason I really wanted to run the poll is because I think we've all been touched by some form of compassion and empathy. And, you know, for me, compassion has three core areas. It's being aware, it's showing vulnerability, and it's empathy. And so to have awareness, we start with recognizing our own emotional literacy. The emotions that we feel have a subjective and a psychological component. And so, you know, when I look at the experience of emotion, of, you know, happy, joy, sadness, our body reacts. There's an emotional trigger, which then also impacts the actions that we take and the behaviors. And so since we've been in lockdown, there's been an impact on our social connectedness and a physical one, social impact, a physical impact on our social connectedness. And yet we found different ways. We found a virtual way to connect. And so what we saw at the beginning of lockdown is we saw that our leaders were showing with vulnerability. They were sharing their own experiences. They were asking colleagues how they are. They were sharing that this is a moment that they've never experienced before, so they may make decisions that they might get wrong, but they're making it from a good place. And so empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from their frame of reference, and that capacity to place one inside, you know, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And for me, that's always been really important, particularly from an inclusion perspective. You know, I always say no one walks in your shoes, and particularly in this pandemic, we've all experienced it and had different meaning and experience. It's been unique to each one of us. And so what compassionate leadership has really brought forward is how when we show up with compassion and vulnerability, we're also becoming more aware. We're becoming aware of our own emotional literacy. And we know there's so much data out there that shows when we are vulnerable at work or we are engaged at work and we're empathetic, we feel more empowered. And you asked me a really good question of where have I seen this, you know, and I've seen several organizations, and I think what I'd say is, first of all, my firm where I'm at, absolutely phenomenal care, phenomenal interest in each person. I've also seen it outside my firm. There's, you know, an insurance organization that I know have offered their mental health scheme for all of their IFAs. And I thought that is such a phenomenal thing to do. They've opened it as a voluntary support for their community. And, you know, there's another one that we've all know about, Airbnb. So they sent a CEO sent a beautiful note using words that I just thought really resonates with empathy, compassion, and vulnerability. How often do we use words like, you know, I love my employees and I care for you and I, you know, I'm connected. And there's been some really difficult decisions that we've had to make during this time.
It's really, yeah, that's really interesting. I did see the Airbnb messaging actually, and some of the other things that I've seen, which have been quite surprising, are around CEOs, particularly of small businesses, working for free. Not just CEOs as well, but kind of whole leadership teams. You know, not just taking drastic cuts, but actually working for free, because that selflessness will benefit other people. And actually, they're finding, interestingly, that their purpose and their enjoyment for work is more than when they were being paid, which is quite interesting. And another thing that I've seen around vulnerability, which you've just mentioned, was this big learning campaign that I think it was Citibank or one of those big organizations did quite recently. And they had very senior people broadcasting videos about mental health, and actually it was quite personal, it was very vulnerable. not just saying, reach out to your colleagues, do this, but individuals saying, I've suffered with depression, this is how I got through it. These are kind of the advice, these are the signs to look out for. And I don't know if we would have seen that vulnerability before.
Oh, I've been in the diversity, inclusion and wellbeing space for quite some time, and we've seen a shift. I say pre-COVID, there's definitely been a shift, and we should recognise and celebrate that, particularly in the mental health side, more and more leaders are speaking up, more and more leaders are showing vulnerability. But I think what COVID has done is it's created a new angle. It's really brought up the empathy. We have genuinely come into conversations with warmth, with consideration, right? So many of us are caring for, or homeschooling, or caring for elderly parents or family. Many are maybe shielding, and so we're worried about our own colleagues. So it's taken a different angle and we've pivoted slightly differently. And I think it's a moment, whilst it's very sad that we're going through this pandemic, I think there's been some truly magical moments from a corporate perspective that we should try and bottle.
So how do you think we might sustain this after lockdown? Let's say in a month or so's time, things return to some kind of normality. How do we keep this compassion?
So I think, I first of all say that we are all leaders. This is not just for the CEOs, it's not just for the executive teams. It's, if we kind of really take a step and just a moment to reflect on how we have all shown up during this time, and we've been accountable for how we show up, and recognizing how we lead ourselves first and foremost, and then how we support our teammates and our leaders as well, because they need support. And so it's paying attention to what behaviors we have taken. So for example, listening with devotion, right? So when we've worked home in this crisis, we've really taken a moment to pause. We've really taken a moment before every meeting to ask, how are you? How are things? How are the family? And listening, not rushing to delve into the meeting agenda, and allowing ourselves to have 5 minutes for a really, truly authentic, empathetic conversation. And that really, and it's the micro behaviors. It doesn't always have to be about big investments. And I think the second thing is that we've also taken some time. We've all been really super busy, but we've also taken the time to just pause and pace. And I think that pause and pace is really important. So that 5 minutes of self-care is important, because if we take care of ourselves, then the likelihood is we'll take care of the people around us. And so what I would invite everyone who's listening today is really just take note of what we've done in the last 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and where we found that things have really shifted and there's been some positive outcomes. Write them down and take them to your next team meeting and have a conversation and explore. Let's be curious. How can we bottle this? How can we take it forward as part of reshifting our strategic objectives, our operational plans, the way our teams will work? Because there's a great opportunity, and what we've seen is we've accelerated how we've come together.
I like that. And I think a lot of the people we've got on the call are from a HR background. They might be quite early in their HR career or really experienced and more of a leader. But I think HR can probably support this. And I guess there's a bit of a spectrum, because HR can be known for putting in place lots of policies and rules and procedures and maybe values and things like that. So I think there are probably quite structured things maybe that HR could do. But then there are also the unwritten kind of cultural soft things that HR might be able to do to kind of maintain that style of leadership. And what are your views on what HR can do, I guess, in both of those camps?
Yeah, well, let's start kind of from the beginning. I've taken some time to reflect on this moment, because it has been an incredible moment. I think there's several things. One is we're all grieving. There's grief going on, and we all know about the Kubler-Ross change curve and the acceptance. And there's 5 stages to that, but there's a 6th one that's been added most recently, and that's given meaning to kind of grief and what that grief is. What I think, so that's really important to first of all recognize, is that everyone's grieving. It could be grieving for a lover, for a lost one. It could be grieving that I can't travel to the office anymore to be with teammates, particularly those who are extroverts. You know, they get their energy and creativity by being around people. Or the introverts who are now feeling really anxious about the potential of returning to the office. So I think it's first of all recognizing that we all are grieving, and we're all, as I've said earlier on, taking this experience very differently. So leave no one behind, engage with each person. And I know many of us are doing all these pulse surveys, and they are phenomenal. They provide us with insight and data. I would now start to invite us to take it down another layer, which is have the conversations. Have the conversations and be curious. What is lying behind some of this data that we're getting? So back to the human conversation, back to the empathetic conversation. The second piece I'd mention is, it's really interesting, for probably several years I haven't spoken about Maslow hierarchy of needs, and then all of a sudden a few weeks ago it just kind of came to mind, and I thought, wow, we've literally just experienced Maslow's hierarchy of needs in real time. Because when you think about when we went into lockdown, what was the first thing all our organizations did? They were concerned for our well-being. They were concerned for our families' well-being. And yes, they were, ensuring that we had all the equipment so we can work effectively from home. And so the reason I mentioned Maslow hierarchy of needs is, if we use that as our anchor point, we've spent the last few weeks, looking at feeling safe, making sure our people are safe. Now we can start to look and work up through the hierarchy of needs and really start to empower our people. And again, we've noticed that our people are empowered now. They're making decisions, and that's partly because we're all so busy. Not every decision is going to get a sign off, so we're empowering our people. So like with every earthquake, there's an aftershock. So take some time to start identifying what is the aftershock and the unintended consequences of the decisions that we've made. And there might be some amazing decisions that we've made that we want to bottle. So it's about creating some time to be curious and to identify. And the other thing that's kind of really struck me during this time, and as an HR director, we've all worked on succession planning, talent pipeline. What I found really interesting about this time is we've seen talent shine in real time. And my first question is, has there been anyone that you have seen in your organization where their talent has shone that hasn't been on your talent pipeline? And how can we now start to really invite leadership programs that looks at talent, that doesn't necessarily have to follow a rigid process? And I know it sounds really uncomfortable sometimes to say that, but the fact that we have experienced people really come out of their shell, and I talk a lot about unlocking talent, and we've just unleashed talent in real time. We've had people make sure, particularly the IT teams, particularly the HR community, wow, this is a moment for HR to really kind of experience making some business impactful decisions, which is phenomenal. And the last thing I'd say on what HR can do is start to, we've all written our competency frameworks, we've all, contributed to leadership programs, or written them or delivered them ourselves. And we tend to talk about soft and hard skills. And I'd love us to now just start to talk about skills. What skills do we need for the future? Not hard skills, not soft skills, not technical, just what skills? Because when we talk about what skills do we need, we might start to add on there all the EQ that we need. So all the emotional intelligence that we've been talking about, which is the empathy, the kindness, the devoted listening.
And do you think that some of the skills and the attributes that have shone through in talent over the past few weeks, people that can remain calm in a crisis, or people that are good at problem solving, or people that are good at innovating and thinking of new ways to deliver their service, for example, do you think that those things can be taught, or do you think it's about trying to find people that naturally have those skills and harness them?
I think we all have those skills. I think it's I think it's about culture. It's creating an ecosystem that enables us to feel safe, that we can show our emotion, that we can show our vulnerability. You know, that when you asked me this morning, how are you? How often do we turn around and say, actually, I'm not having a great day, you know, and feeling comfortable by saying I'm not having a great day.
Mm.
We're not saying I'm not having a great day because I'm looking for you to fix it. I'm just stating I'm not having a good day. And so it's those small micro behaviors. I think we all have EQ. It's creating the culture that really provides us with a platform to feel comfortable to share.
Mm. And it's interesting because we've had this debate on myHRcareers before, when we have somebody that represents a very EQ, intuition, you know, those lovely softer sides to HR, and then we quite often have somebody that's more about data and using technology better. And I want to invite you to have that discussion again here as well, because it seems like, although we need to use data and tech really well, and we definitely need to use data to understand what's happening in our businesses, it seems like there is a real need right now for HR to go back to being intuitive and tuning in with how people are feeling, and empathy.
So data is absolutely critical. And I normally in these kind of sessions, I relay lots of data. I chose today not to do that. And that's partly because I wanted to go back to the human conversation. Critical, and particularly when you're in a leadership environment and you're influencing the leaders and you are part of the leadership team, a lot of our actions and decisions that we make is driven by data and insight. And so the data is critical, particularly when you start to see trend. It helps you make informed decisions. The empathy, the EQ skills, everything that I've spoken about, the devoted listening, it is not only for HR, it's for everyone across the organization. I would invite HR to start to really weave it into all the things that we do, all our processes. So when we run performance appraisals, you know, how do we have those conversations? How do we have the with empathy? Somebody shares with you that they are experiencing mental health challenges. How do we support them? How do we work with the management team? Because the managers will be having these daily conversations. So I think, you know, that data is absolutely critical. And I would also just add that from an inclusion perspective, creating an environment where we can all contribute is fundamental. And sometimes the data helps us accelerate the approaches and the strategies that we take.
And for the people on the call, you know, if you think about this from a HR director point of view, if you're a HR person on the call, you might be super busy, you know, managing all the payroll changes and furloughing and, you know, all this kind of stuff because of COVID. You might also be in the camp where, because you're in recruitment or in learning, or because your business has been negatively impacted, you might be less busy than normal. Do you think there's any, and I know this is going slightly off topic, but it's related, do you think that there's any upskilling or retraining or reading that those HR people should do to help them to be more compassionate leaders and to help them be, you know, better equipped for whatever the new reality is?
So I'm a great believer in learning, investing in your own development. As you say, Becky, it could be just reading or listening to podcasts. There's lots of books out there there's one called Everyone Matters. There's lots of books on inclusive leadership, which is all about empathy as well. There's lots of material out there. I think, yes, have a read, listen to podcasts, go on EQ training, develop EQ training and bring it into your organization. And a place to start is just, first of all, take note. What have we done in the last 10 weeks? We didn't have any training to deal with a pandemic. None of us have. None of us did a pandemic. And so we were all learning with each day. And some of us made mistakes. I think most of us, even myself, we've made mistakes. And we're learning. We're navigating. And I think there's more tolerance and forgiveness for making mistakes when we are in a position of coming from empathy and recognizing and actually saying, I've made an error, I've made a mistake. But answering your question, yes, there's lots of materials to read. I would invite you, first of all, to start with how have I shown up and what have I found? And also, where have you seen leaders or other people, colleagues, show up with empathy, compassion, and kindness? And you think, actually, that behavior I really would like to bottle and take forward in my organization.
Mm. Please submit any questions. I'm just coming to the end of our questions here, so please let me know if you've got any questions or comments that you'd like us to feed in. You know, you've worked in lots of different countries, different organizations, and you know, you've done kind of quite generalist HR director roles, and now, you know, I believe your focus is really on inclusion and well-being. And we haven't talked too much about kind of personal well-being on this one, but you know, do you think that this compassionate leadership, and do you think the crisis will improve our diversity and inclusion?
So I think, you know, in the D&I space, there's a lot of concern that D&I will take a back seat, and I truly hope it won't, because we all know that cognitive diversity is really important. So breaking down the group think. So if we are to remain creative and innovative, we all know the McKinsey data. We've seen the recent McKinsey report, Diversity Wins. If anyone hasn't, jump onto their website. And so we all recognise the business case, and we all recognise that we should be investing time.
Just trying to get my cat off of the table.
I love it. Bring the cat.
He's rubbing up against the laptop. I'm like, go away.
Love the cat. We love this. It's great. This is what we're talking about. I love it. So to answer your question, I think what I'd say is I like to keep things simple, and let's start with just a really simple example, but very powerful example. So we know, for example, we're all working from home now, right? Have we considered technical inclusion? So is your IT infrastructure inclusive for people who are visually impaired? Because we may not know everyone in our business who may have visual impairment or hearing impairment. What is the impact of this remote working for people who have neurodiversity? What is the intersection between the diversity of disability and well-being? There's a massive. So we know people who have bipolar will have their life expectancy shortened by about approximately 10-15 years.
Wow.
Because of the impact on their physical well-being. So they have the impact on their cardiovascular. So for example, so the intersection between diversity, inclusion, and well-being is critical. And we're now seeing this again in real time. And so for me, diversity, inclusion, and well-being is phenomenal, is absolutely phenomenally impactful when we get it right. And we've seen some wonderful examples. And well-being, I'd love it to continue what it should be on the board agenda, and I think organisations should be investing in the strategic direction of well-being, diversity, and inclusion. And so the examples I just gave are just a few. I would also talk about the introverts and extroverts. That, you know, they're all experiencing this moment in time very differently, and we could use the purpose of the organisation as the golden thread. So we've seen this. We've seen it again currently, you know, when we went into lockdown. So we've accelerated our communication. We accelerated our engagement. We accelerated looking after our people. And what we used behind all of that was two things. The purpose of the organisation. So we've united to a common goal. And that first goal was to make sure everyone's okay. And second of all, we underpinned it with compassion and empathy.
And I've got a question here from someone in our audience, which I think they saw the same survey from the Happiness Index this morning as I did, which said that the food and drink sector are the least happy at the moment. And I guess if that includes, you know, hospitality and things like that, then it's troubling times. So do you think, you know, how can we keep morale up, and how can we, I guess, shift the purpose for industries or businesses that have probably been hit really hard by COVID? Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I think it's, it's such a challenging time for so many, and the hospitality industry being one, the travel being second. It is just, and we're about, we're going to walk into a recession, a global recession. So it's very challenging. And then, put that against a landscape of, health, the virus is still there. And so engagement, for me, it all comes back to engagement, engaging with your people and being honest, just sharing what we can and what we know. There's a lot we still don't know, and as we know, the government is, we easing off lockdown. We might go back, who knows what's going to happen. So I think it's just communicating and engaging on that front. Yeah, I think that's really important. The other thing I'd add overall, on just coming back to your D&I question, because I think it's really important, is as HR professionals, we should also be mindful of the reputational risk. So if we talk to our chief risk officers, so the risk of ignoring, not doing something, and in this case, not being mindful of the well-being of our people, not being inclusive, not creating a sustainable business. So we as HR professionals have a role to play in creating a sustainable business.
Mm. Thank you, Tali. And then I've got another question around performance reviews, actually. And this is quite specific because it's summertime and lots of companies are coming up to kind of end of year performance reviews. And this is really, is your business doing anything differently around performance reviews? I mean, I guess it's all going to be made remote, but, are there going to be any of these kind of softer skills, I guess, brought into that review process, or is it just going to be a case of just getting through it and making it work remotely?
So we as a firm are still doing our reviews, and as a law firm, absolutely, and we're doing it remotely. And yes, it's combined with the empathy, checking in, how are you, and it's about output. So how is the success measures been in place whilst you've been homeschooling or caring or working from your bedroom? Because not everyone has an office in their house or in their flat. Some people are flat sharing or co-sharing. So it's we're still holding those conversations. It's fundamental, because I think as a colleague, you would like to have some feedback, and you would like actually that moment where you can share how this time has been for you. And so again, I would invite organizations to continue. Every firm will do it slightly different, because it needs to be authentic for that firm. But it's just being mindful of how, bearing in mind, like even now, just your cat came over, right? Being mindful that we're in a different environment. So when we're having those conversations, it's being considerate of the environment that we're in. And yes, performance still needs to be measured. At the end of the day, we're still running a business. So I think this is where the role of HR becomes very interesting. So whilst we are bringing in compassion, empathy, EQ, we're also here to support the business to remain sustainable. So measure how we're doing, and this is where the data comes in, right? The data is really important, and one element of the data is performance.
And I've got one more question about recruitment, actually. And interestingly, I saw that I think it's Walmart have hired something like 5,000 people per week for the past few weeks. Like, it's insane mass recruitment. And someone on the call is also kind of recruiting en masse, so doing really well throughout the virus. Is there any advice or tips for recruiting quickly and en masse, but without compromising on, skills and quality?
I always say with recruitment, so I think first of all, the way we recruit is going to change. And I've always said it needs to change from an inclusion perspective, because the good old-fashioned way of recruiting, of writing news, I know, and artificial intelligence, let's put aside the technology for a moment. I think sometimes when we look at recruitment, we may miss out some superbly high talented individuals, or individuals with potential, through the traditional ways of recruiting. So I think this creates another really amazing opportunity for us as HR professionals to start to explore innovative ways, right? And many organizations are really embracing innovative ways, but we can stretch it further. In terms of mass recruitment, I think there's a balance, because what we really don't want to have happen is we recruit and then find that it's not going to work out for whatever reason. So I think first of all, it's doing the forecasting. What do we need? when do we need it by, and what are the immediate skills we need? And I come back to the word skills. So the holistic approach to what it is that we need and why. So ask yourselves those questions first, and then you can go into starting the recruitment process and have the dialogue. You know, here we are having a virtual platform, having those dialogues, really getting under the skin of what and why and when. And you will find out very quickly if your new approach to recruitment en masse is working.
And I think it's really important to gather feedback actually from candidates, because I mean, my sister is going through an interview process with the police, and she has gone from doing a big assessment day, which, you know, would have had its own challenges, but it meant that, you know, she would have been meeting different people, they observe your team dynamics, you have different challenges. She's moved from that assessment day to a Skype interview, which she had last week, and she really struggled because, you know, the technology was quite stressful. Before I joined this call, couldn't get my video to work, so that was kind of stressing her out a bit. And she felt that she doesn't come across as well, you know, on Skype. It's quite artificial. There's two of them. You've got your notes and you're trying to read the questions. And, you know, I think she felt that shift to the kind of lockdown version of the recruitment process was really not advantageous for her. And, you know, she will feed back, but I wonder how quickly they'll be able to think about that, and whether they will be a little bit more flexible and lenient, you know, in their kind of shortlisting process or not.
So I think the whole recruitment virtually is a challenge, and I think also the onboarding is a challenge. You know, we know many who have started and have never met their colleagues physically. So I think we're all learning, and this is where it comes to really starts to be really interesting and showing our own vulnerability. We don't know what we don't know. This is new for all of us. And yes, I think some will find the virtual interviews and onboarding, they will be thriving, and some won't. And I think we're all going to be more tolerant, and we're all going to learn from this. So I would like to think and hope that those interviewing will start to explore what else they can do to support the candidates. And some of it may just be a phone call, second stage of phone call with no video, because there is some Zoom fatigue going on right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, what other overlays can we have in the absence of physical interviews?
Yeah, and this is a related question from Nigel. So Nigel says, any thoughts about compassionate leadership over Zoom or other online environments? Have you seen a difference from the normal face-to-face opportunity to display empathy?
So one of the things I tend to do, and I haven't done it here today, I normally kind of look that way, because what I'm doing is, well, one, I've got a window, then beautiful sunshine. What it does do is I then stop looking at the screen for a moment, and I'm just listening. I'm using my senses. And so when I come back to the screen, my body's just relaxed even more so. So I think it's a lot of it's being mindful. It's about relaxing. It's about just using all your senses. And so when I talk about devoted listening, it's about using our senses, using, you know, paying attention to our tonality. So we know that only 7% of our communication is heard through our spoken words. We know the rest is our body language. And you would have seen here today, I talk a lot with my hands. I can't help it. How I talk. And so that hasn't changed. And what I've become more mindful and aware of is, how do I express myself over the virtual platform? And I am slowly kind of really creating opportunities that some of the conversations are just by phone calls. So good old fashioned phone, because what it does, it just breaks what enables us to tap into all our other senses. Because sometimes when we just listen and not look at you, we're paying attention. We're paying attention. Is there any stress there? Is there any, the tone changed? You know, and you gave a really good example when you jumped on and your video wasn't working. I picked up on that really quickly. Even before,
I was so stressed. I was like, oh, I can't get the video to work. Nothing's working.
Before I knew what was happening, because I didn't know what happened at first. And I was like, I picked it up really quickly. And that was because I actually wasn't looking at the screen. I was just listening. And so it's just finding ways that works for you as an individual, and how you can connect in this virtual world to pick up on the smaller distinctions of our behaviors. And it can be challenging, particularly when it's people we don't know, because not all our meetings are with our work colleagues. Some can be with new stakeholders, new partners, and we're building rapport for the first time virtually. And rapport building is critical.
Love it, thank you. So I think that's the end of our questions. Was there anything else before I close, Tali, that you wanted to talk about? Anything else that you wanted to mention before I close us down?
Maybe just to close off, I'd say, first of all, this is the time for us as HR professionals, to really make that business contribution. No matter where you are in your career, if you're at the beginning of your career, this is an amazing opportunity to really learn, to really get stuck in. People like me who are kind of heading towards the end, not entirely the end, but more at the experience side, I'd say is enjoy it. I know it's tough. I know it's hard. It is heartbreaking to see so many people lose their lives. It's so heartbreaking that I would do anything not to be in this environment. And whilst we are in this environment, from not only a business perspective, but a personal one, use this opportunity to learn, use it as an opportunity to contribute, and use it as an opportunity to recognize that inclusion, diversity, and wellbeing is absolutely fundamental in everything that we do. And we've seen it. We've seen how leaders are now taken on board, and engagement. So everything that I do is about engagement, and start to recognize what works in your organization. So how often, and how do we peel the different layers of the onion? So whilst we're all doing pulse surveys, let's just have some conversations so we can start to be curious of what's behind those conversations.
Thank you. I hope everyone's enjoyed our webinar as much as I have. We haven't really rehearsed this, so all of this stuff is new for me to hear, and it was really interesting. Thank you. For anyone that hasn't been on our other webinars, there's loads going on. So Monday and Tuesday tends to be kind of myHRcareers days, so very HR-y topics. Wednesday is either automation and AI in HR, or it's about reframing your HR technology and transformation programs. So that's this Wednesday. And then every Thursday at 10 o'clock, we have Anatomy of a Crisis. And this is where Tom, our CEO, interviews a HR leader from a business about their returning to work, how they're dealing with things like D&I and well-being. And we have a general chat about, where the business is in the stages of a crisis and how they're adapting to the next stage. Thursday, I'm really excited because we've got Avon. So Avon was recently bought by Natura & Co, who also own Aesop and The Body Shop. And they're talking about, the triple bottom line, they call it. So not just profit, but also the planet and product, and how the crisis has changed their mission and their purpose and actually brought everyone together. So it really brings to life a lot of the topics that we've talked about today, Tali. So you've lined him up nicely.
Oh, but, Becky, I love that, because I could have spoken for another hour about how we have all, so I know you would about to end, but I think so it links to what you've just said, how everything, again, when we look at what we've been doing, we've been focused on our colleagues, our clients, and our communities. And so that common purpose, so our purpose is the golden thread, is what I said. I could talk to you for another hour about purpose.
Another time, we'll do a follow-up.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone, again for joining. Hopefully that worked for you and you're either eating lunch or about to have lunch. So enjoy Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Make sure you're getting some nice, nutritious food and a bit of sunshine. So hopefully I'll see you all again soon. If there's any other questions you think of, let us know and we can get them over to Tali. And I will see you all again soon. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much, Tali.
Thank you, Becky.